The rain had been falling since dawn, turning the city into a blur of silver reflections. I barely noticed anymore. When you spend enough years alone with your work, the sound of water becomes background noise, something between comfort and warning. On my desk, the light from the screen flickered across piles of notebooks, coffee stains, and crumpled sketches of code structures that had rewritten my life 100 times. I was waiting for one thing, a single confirmation from a man I had never met in person, but whose voice had haunted my inbox for 3 months. "Miss Walsh," he said finally through the laptop speakers. His tone was clean, American, efficient. "We're ready to close the deal whenever you are." The document sat open before me, 60 pages of legal precision, one signature box blinking at the bottom. A few more keystrokes, and 5 years of sleepless nights would turn into $60 million. But even as I stared at it, my phone buzzed against the table. I didn't need to check the name. Somehow I already knew. Camille. "Don't forget my wedding next month. Black tie. Please try to look human this time." A familiar mix of irritation and sadness crawled under my skin. She still knew how to make me feel 12 again, the awkward sister who never fit in, who talked too much about logic and algorithms while she dazzled entire rooms just by walking in. I placed the phone face down and looked at the screen again. "Miss Walsh?" the voice asked. "Yes," I said softly, "I'm here. Are we good to sign?" For a heartbeat, I hesitated. There was no one to share this moment with. No champagne waiting in a bucket of ice, no cameras, no proud family clapping. Just me, the glow of the laptop, and the smell of rain drifting through a cracked window. I pressed my finger on the trackpad and clicked sign. The confirmation tone was almost anticlimactic, a soft chime, barely louder than a sigh. But in that instant, something shifted in the air around me. The contract vanished from the waiting queue and reappeared in my archive, completed, executed, irreversible. That was it. 5 years of being the family's embarrassment. 5 years of being told I was throwing away my future, of being politely ignored at dinner tables where only stock portfolios and charity galas counted as real achievements. All of it gone, I closed the laptop and leaned back. The ceiling of my tiny flat stared back at me like a blank canvas, its pale paint cracked near the corner. I could fix that now. I could fix a lot of things, but I didn't move. The victory felt quiet, almost too quiet, like the silence after a long storm when you're not sure if it's really over. I reached for my coffee and found it cold. Typical. Success, like everything else in my life, came without ceremony. A vibration from the phone again. I ignored it for a moment, then curiosity won. "Mother says you're still working in that apartment. At your age, Aurelia, maybe it's time to stop pretending you're going to change the world. Some of us already have." My sister's words had always been knives disguised as pearls. I could almost see her smirking as she typed, wrapped in some designer robe in a penthouse overlooking the Seine. Camille had everything: the degree, the charm, the fiancé with a last name that opened doors in every European boardroom. And me? I had an idea, a stubborn streak, and a line of code that no one believed in until now. I typed back only one sentence. "Don't worry, Camille, I'll bring something special." I hit send and locked the phone. Outside, the rain softened into mist, and the traffic below sounded like a pulse rising through the streets. I stood and stretched, my spine cracking from hours of stillness. My reflection stared back from the window, hair tied messily, dark circles under my eyes, the kind of face success wouldn't change overnight. But something was different. There was a steadiness in my gaze that hadn't been there before. I turned back to my desk and opened another window on the screen, not for celebration, but for curiosity. Project Lyra, Predictive Financial Instability Dashboard, my AI system. My obsession. It had started as a research experiment in Cambridge, long before anyone cared about predictive modeling for market ethics. Now, it pulsed with streams of live data from hundreds of corporations worldwide. The code was elegant, brutal, unforgiving, much like me. I scanned through the latest results absent-mindedly, eyes catching on familiar names. Then one line froze me. Blackwell Holdings, instability risk, 78% status, red alert. For a second, I thought it was a bug. I refreshed. The result stayed. A pattern of irregular debt cycles, over-leveraged assets, shell subsidiaries in tax havens. I frowned. Alexander Blackwell, that was Camille's fiancé. The same man whose family name had been plastered across every glossy magazine for a decade. The empire of impeccable reputation and wealth. Except my algorithm said otherwise. I leaned closer, scrolling through the data trails, the numbers glowing in streaks of warning red. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the eerie precision of it. The system never made false predictions. Not once. I sat back slowly, heartbeat catching up to the realization. Camille had mocked me all her life for chasing logic over luxury. And yet, it was logic, pure, relentless mathematics, that was about to crush the world she worshipped. I stared at the red alert on the screen for a long time before whispering to the empty room. "Well," I said, voice low. "That's interesting." The cursor blinked beside the warning like a silent witness. I closed the dashboard, opened a new file, and wrote a few quick notes. Old habits. Every observation needed evidence. Every emotion needed proof. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, echoing through the bones of the city. I poured another cup of coffee and watched the steam rise. Maybe I should have felt guilty, but instead there was something else, a strange calm. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was only data. And data never lied. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of London light that feels more like absence than day. I hadn't slept. My mind kept circling the same point, the same flashing red line on the dashboard that wouldn't leave my thoughts. When I finally stepped away from the desk, the room smelled of burnt coffee and cold ambition. I opened the curtains just enough for a stripe of weak light to fall across the floor. The city was already alive, buses hissing through puddles, strangers rushing under umbrellas, everyone chasing something that probably didn't matter. My apartment had never looked smaller. The walls were lined with sticky notes and charts, the floor a mess of wires and half-assembled prototypes. To anyone else, it would look chaotic, but to me it was order. Every page was a memory of nights when I was too tired to cry, too stubborn to stop. The kettle clicked. I poured hot water over instant coffee and watched the steam blur my reflection in the window. It struck me then that I hadn't told a single soul about the deal. Not my friends from university, not the few colleagues who still checked in sometimes, and certainly not my family. Keeping it secret wasn't strategy. It was instinct. For so long, every victory I'd ever shared with them had turned into a lecture, every idea into a joke. Silence had become my armor. My laptop chimed again. New message, subject line, "Welcome to the future." I opened it. A confirmation from the American firm attached with a schedule of transfer dates and a photo of the team smiling in some glass-walled office in New York. They looked so young, so sure of themselves. I envied that certainty. Another message appeared a second later, this time from Camille. "Father says you've been ignoring us again. Don't embarrass Mother at the wedding. Remember, appearances matter." Appearances. The word felt like poison on my tongue. For my family, image was everything: polished manners, perfect posture, a smile that never cracked. I had spent half my life trying to fit that frame until I realized it was never meant for me. I typed a response but deleted it halfway through. There was nothing to explain. They would never understand the quiet kind of success that doesn't need applause. I put on my coat and left the apartment. The air outside was sharp with the smell of wet pavement and exhaust fumes. I walked without purpose, past the corner bakery that always opened too early, past the bookstore that still had my favorite programming manual in the window. A group of schoolchildren ran past me laughing. One of them tripped, fell, and got up again unfazed. For a moment, I envied that resilience, the way children fall without thinking about who's watching. By the time I reached the Thames, the rain had started again, fine and cold. I stood at the railing, watching the water churn beneath the bridge. Somewhere out there, my future was already unfolding, numbers transferring, contracts locking in, systems shifting. $60 million. It sounded absurd, even in my own head. What do you do with a number like that? Buy silence? Rewrite history? A sudden vibration in my pocket broke the thought. My phone again. Camille video call. I hesitated before answering. Her face appeared, flawless even through the low-quality camera. "Aurelia," she said with a smile that wasn't really a smile. "Finally." "I was beginning to think you forgotten how to pick up." "I've been busy." "Of course you have, saving the world with your little machines." She tilted her head. Behind her, I could see the pale marble walls of our parents' house, flowers arranged just so. "Anyway, I wanted to remind you about the pre-wedding dinner. Everyone will be there. You should come, try to be on time for once." "I'll think about it." "You never think about it, you just disappear." "Father says it's embarrassing when people ask what you do." "Tell them I build things that keep your husband's company from collapsing." She frowned. "What does that even mean?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "Forget it." She rolled her eyes. "You're impossible. Just be there, Aurelia, and don't wear anything tragic, please." The call ended before I could answer. I stared at the black screen for a long moment. Somewhere deep inside, the part of me that still cared felt the old sting of rejection. But beneath it, something colder stirred: anticipation. Let them think I was nothing. Let them polish their silver and rehearse their smiles. When I walked into that ballroom, they would see. I turned back toward home, rain clinging to my hair, my shoes soaking through. The city roared around me, indifferent and alive. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell marked noon. By the time I reached my street, the decision had already formed in my mind. The wedding would not be the day I stayed silent. It would be the day I spoke without saying a word. Back in my apartment, I changed into dry clothes and sat again at the desk. The contract confirmation glowed on the screen. I opened another tab, the one that still displayed the red alert beside Blackwell Holdings. 81% now. The number had climbed overnight. The algorithm was never wrong. I saved the file, encrypted it, and leaned back. The hum of the computer filled the silence. I whispered to no one. "Happy wedding, Camille." Then I smiled, not out of cruelty, but out of a quiet certainty that for once the truth was finally on my side. Outside, the rain turned to sunlight, spilling across the rooftops in gold fragments. It felt like a beginning. I had not planned to see her again before the wedding. Camille existed better in absence. She was easier to tolerate when she was an idea, not a person. But the universe, with its cruel sense of humor, decided otherwise. It was a Saturday afternoon. The city outside buzzed with weekend noise, sirens in the distance, laughter from the cafe downstairs. I was halfway through rewriting part of the algorithm when a firm, impatient knock rattled my door. 3 sharp knocks, the kind that already expect obedience. I froze. Only one person knocked like that. I opened the door a fraction, just enough to confirm what I already knew. Camille stood there, immaculate as ever, a wool coat draped over her shoulders, her hair curled into deliberate perfection. Behind her, a man in a black suit held a box wrapped in ivory paper. "Surprise," she said. Her smile was wide, but it never reached her eyes. "May I come in?" She didn't wait for an answer. She swept past me, the scent of expensive perfume filling the air. The bodyguard placed the box on my counter and left silently. Camille's heels clicked against the wooden floor as she looked around. Her gaze moved from the peeling paint on the window frame to the stack of empty coffee mugs by the sink. Then came the inevitable sigh. "Still living like this," she said. "Aurelia, honestly, how do you survive in such austerity?" "I manage," I replied, closing the door. "What do you want, Camille?" "Can't I visit my sister?" She turned, feigning offense. "Mother was worried. She said you might have forgotten how to socialize before the big day." "The big day?" I repeated it quietly, the words tasting like dust. "Your wedding." Her smile brightened. "Exactly. You got the invitation, didn't you?" "It was hard to miss," I said, glancing at the gold envelope still lying on my desk. She followed my gaze, then gestured to the wrapped box the guard had delivered. "That's from the bridal committee," she said. "A small gift to help you prepare. Inside you'll find a dress, shoes, and a stylist's card. Please, Aurelia, do not wear black again. You look like a widow at Father's charity dinner." I didn't answer. The silence between us felt like a third presence in the room. Camille wandered toward my workstation. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, dangerously close to the screen, still showing a faint afterglow from last night's data logs. "Still doing this project?" she asked. "You mean my company?" She tilted her head, amused. "Company, such a dramatic word for something run out of a shoebox apartment." I stepped closer, quietly closing the laptop. Her reflection in the dark screen looked distorted, the smile stretching too far. "You didn't come here to deliver a dress," I said. She shrugged. "Maybe I didn't. Maybe I wanted to understand why you're so determined to isolate yourself from everyone who actually made it." I almost laughed. "Made it?" "Yes, made it," she repeated. "You could have joined Father's firm years ago. He offered you a position, he told me. But no, you had to prove something. And for what? So you could code your life away in this lab of loneliness?" Her words found their mark, but I refused to show it. For years, this was our dance. She would attack, I would deflect. Old habits die hard. "You always confuse peace with failure," I said softly. "That's what people say when they have no success to show." Her tone was sharp enough to slice through the air. I felt a faint ache behind my ribs but didn't flinch. Camille leaned against the desk, folding her arms. "Anyway," she continued, "Mother wants me to make sure you attend. She's nervous you'll do something dramatic. Like existing." "Like embarrassing us," she corrected. Then she smiled again, the way a cat smiles at a mouse it no longer needs to chase. "I know you, Aurelia, you can't stand watching me win." Win? That single word lit something inside me, something old and long dormant, but I kept my voice even. "I don't see life as a competition." "Of course you don't," she said. "People only say that when they're losing." She laughed at her own line, walked to the window, and looked down at the street. The light caught her hair like gold thread. To anyone else, she would look like a woman blessed by the world, beautiful, successful, loved. To me, she was a mirror I had stopped believing in. "Why are you marrying him, Camille?" I asked suddenly. She turned, startled. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one. Do you love Alexander, or do you just love the name?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. For a second, I saw the flicker of doubt beneath her perfect mask. Then it vanished. "You wouldn't understand," she said. "You've never had options." That stung more than it should have. I looked at her and saw not cruelty, but fear. People like Camille didn't build things, they inherited them. The thought of losing that inheritance terrified her. "Maybe you're right," I said quietly. "Maybe I don't understand your world." She smiled again, satisfied with the surrender. I picked up the box and handed it back to her. "Keep it. I already have what I'm going to wear." She looked curious. "Really? What could possibly top a custom Dior?" I let a small smile slip. "You'll see." She laughed lightly, mistaking the calm in my voice for bluff. Then she walked to the door, pausing before leaving. "Try not to come alone," she said. "It's awkward when people assume you're staff." The door closed behind her with a soft click. For a long time, I didn't move. The silence she left behind pressed against my chest. My fingers curled slightly at my sides, nails digging into my palm. I inhaled slowly, counting until the anger faded into something colder. Then I turned to the desk, reopened the laptop, and pulled up the same red warning from the night before. Blackwell Holdings, instability risk, 84%. My pulse quickened. The number was rising. The pattern was becoming sharper, inevitable. I whispered to myself, barely audible. "Appearances do matter, Camille. They always do." I watched the door until the echo of her heels dissolved into the hallway. The room felt colder, as if her perfume had opened a window somewhere and let winter in. I closed my eyes and waited for the ache to pass. It did, the way pain always fades when you decide to use it. Back at the desk, the dashboard pulsed with quiet urgency. Red numerals climbed in steady ticks, like a fever you pretend not to notice. Instability at 84. A cluster of transactions flagged as anomalous. A note I had left myself months ago blinked in the corner of the screen. Review debt maturity, ladder for Blackwell subsidiary in Luxembourg. I clicked it open and found the same thing I had seen the first time. Borrowed time disguised as strategy. The kettle clicked again. I poured hot water and let the coffee bloom until the scent washed over the sour left by Camille. I drank slowly and watched the city grit itself for evening. The cafe downstairs turned its lights on. A bus splashed past and left a ribbon of water on the curb that caught the street lamp like a blade. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then answered. "Aurelia," my father's voice, steady, precise, as if each word had been ironed before leaving his mouth. "I am calling because your mother is anxious about the pre-wedding dinner. We would like you to attend. 8 tomorrow, the Dorchester. Please do not be late." There was a pause. I waited for the usual lecture. It did not come. He cleared his throat. "How is your project?" he asked, the word landing with caution, as if he expected it to bite. "It is not a project anymore," I said. "It is a company." Another pause, a faint exhale. "Very well, I will see you tomorrow." The line went dead. No approval, no dismissal, a truce made of silence. I set the phone down and went to the wardrobe. There were not many choices. I had never collected clothes the way Camille collected social invitations. Still, I pulled out a dress that had waited 3 years for a reason to exist. Deep blue, clean lines. It needed no apology and offered none. I held it against me in the mirror and saw a version of myself I barely recognized. Not softer, not harsher, just certain. On the desk, the printer chattered to life. I had sent the contract earlier to a private email, not because I wanted to show it, but because I wanted to feel it. Paper has a kind of gravity screens do not. When the pages slid out, warm and smelling faintly of ink, I stacked them and slipped a simple ribbon around the bundle. No gold envelope, no crest, just truth in black and white. I placed the packet inside a plain folder and set it in the drawer of my bag. Then I sat, opened a blank document, and began to write a short cover letter that said almost nothing, which is to say it said everything. To Camille, for your new beginning, love from your sister. I let the sentence stand. No flourish. No defense. Night settled across the buildings like a long breath held in the chest. I shut off the main lamp and left only the desk light, a small circle of clarity in a room that knew too much about doubt. The dashboard chimed once more. Instability at 86. I logged the reading and closed the lid. Enough truth for one night. I did not sleep much. When I did drift off, I dreamed of a ballroom flooded with light, faces turning toward me the way flowers turn toward the sun, and then away again when they realize the light is not theirs to keep. I woke before dawn and stood at the window while the sky lifted its first pale layer. The city looked clean, as if it had forgiven something. I dressed without ceremony. The blue dress fit like a decision. A single strand of hair refused to behave, then gave up when I asked nicely. I slipped the folder into my bag and checked the clasp twice. Habit, fear disguised as diligence. The Dorchester lobby glowed like champagne. Waiters moved as if guided by a single invisible rhythm. My mother stood near the entrance, fingers resting on the back of a chair in a way that suggested both ownership and restraint. She wore silver. Her eyes did a quick inventory of me and landed on the bag. "You look appropriate," she said. For her, it was a compliment. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Smile when necessary, we will keep the conversation light." "I am not a chandelier," I said. "I am capable of conversation." She pretended not to hear. "Camille will make an entrance in 15 minutes. Sit at the end of the table, near the flowers. It is easier if the photographers do not have to wonder who you are." I moved past her without answering. The table gleamed with crystal and low bowls of white peonies that looked like clouds caught in glass. Guests arrived in curated waves. A hedge fund couple from Mayfair, an editor with a laugh like a trumpet, one of Alexander's uncles with the practiced smile of a man accustomed to sitting on boards. Camille appeared last. Time slowed because she needed it to. The room rearranged itself around her joy. She touched my shoulder as she passed, a gesture that looked affectionate from a distance and felt like ownership up close. "You made it," she whispered. "Do try to enjoy yourself." Dinner unfurled with mechanical grace. Toasts. Anecdotes polished to a shine. The table learned how to laugh in harmony. I learned how to look amused. Alexander spoke about legacy. His father spoke about discipline. My mother spoke about grace. The word family traveled around the room like a gift and returned to its sender with a bow. I sipped water and watched the way Alexander's jaw tightened whenever debt was mentioned. I watched the way his father avoided his eyes when the editor joked about risky plays that always seemed to work out. I watched the way Camille reached for his hand as if reassurance could be passed like a small charm from palm to palm. When dessert arrived, I excused myself and stepped into the corridor. The noise dimmed to a soft hum. I opened my bag and touched the folder as if to confirm it had not evaporated. It felt heavier than paper. It felt like a boundary, a voice behind me. "Hiding already, Alexander?" His expression was politely curious then almost kind. "Gathering air," I said. He nodded. "Crowds can be a sport. Camille thrives on them. I prefer rooms with fewer mirrors." There was something human in the remark that startled me. I looked at him differently then. He was handsome in a careful way, the kind of face that knew expectations would always arrive before he did. A man who had been raised to perform certainty, even when the numbers did not cooperate. "Congratulations," I said. "Marriage is a brave thing." He smiled without teeth. "So is building things alone." The words hit a place I did not show anyone. He glanced at the bag and lifted a brow. "Gift for my bride," I said. "Something pretty?" he asked lightly. "Something true?" He considered me for a fraction too long, then nodded and stepped back. "Enjoy the evening, Miss Walsh." When I returned, the speeches had resumed their gentle march. My mother caught my eye with a look that meant sit, behave, be background. I sat, I behaved, I was background. On the ride home, the city felt like a stage after the actors have gone. My reflection in the car window looked like a stranger I might have liked if we had met earlier in a different life. I reached into the bag and touched the folder again. Still there, still certain. At home, I placed it on the table and stared at it for a long time. This was not revenge. Revenge would have been louder. This was a marker. A line drawn in the cleanest ink I owned. I opened the laptop and checked the dashboard once more before bed. Instability at 87. A new alert from a credit facility in Zurich. A press rumor that would grow teeth within the month. I logged everything, saved the record, and closed the screen. Before I turned off the light, I whispered to the room, as if it were a confidant that knew the shape of my breath. "I will not humiliate you, Camille. I will not shout. I will give you a gift you cannot ignore." Then I will stand very still and let the truth do what truth does. Morning would bring fittings and photographers and 1,000 tiny arrangements designed to prove that life was flawless. I slept at last, not because I was tired, but because certainty is the only real sedative I have ever known. When the alarm rang, the sky was as clean as crystal. I dressed again in the blue, slid the folder into my bag, and locked the door behind me. Down on the street, a child pointed at the clouds and told her mother they looked like ships. The mother agreed, because saying yes to a child is the only way to keep magic alive. I walked toward the day that would change the temperature of every room my family entered. The city moved around me like a river. I did not rush. Truth never does. At the corner, I paused and looked back at the window of my flat. It looked small and ordinary and stubborn. I smiled at it the way you smile at a friend who knows you before and after. Then I kept walking, the folder warm against my palm, the future humming like a wire in the air. The wedding waited. So did the moment when I would place the quiet weight of my work on a white table and watch the world learn my name without anyone having to say it out loud. The morning of Camille's wedding arrived wrapped in perfection. London's sunlight rarely behaved, yet that day it poured across the city like liquid gold. Even the air smelled rehearsed, polished for photographs that would pretend happiness was something permanent. I woke before the alarm. The dress hung from the door, the same deep blue that had waited years to belong somewhere. I ironed nothing. The fabric fell smooth by memory. My reflection in the mirror looked calm, maybe too calm, like someone walking toward a fire who has already decided to keep walking. The car came at 9. A driver in uniform, polite and unreadable, held the door open. He did not need directions. Everyone knew the Blackwell estate. On the seat beside me, the plain folder rested beneath a silk scarf. The ribbon around it pressed lightly against my palm each time the car turned. Outside, fields slid past like a film running too fast. Mansions rose from the mist, proud and identical. The Blackwells had chosen one of their countryside properties for the ceremony, a place that looked less like a home and more like a declaration of wealth. Marble columns. Lake. Swans imported from somewhere swannier. At the gate, guards waved us through. Photographers already clustered along the drive. Their lenses glinted like insects catching the sun. I stepped out, lifted my chin, and for a moment the flash of cameras painted me in borrowed starlight. They did not know who I was, and that ignorance was almost kind. Inside, everything shimmered. White silk draped from ceiling to floor, chandeliers caught every sigh of wind, and a quartet played a melody designed to remind guests of money. The scent of roses and champagne filled the hall until breathing felt expensive. I moved through the crowd like someone tracing a dream. Conversations broke and reformed around me. I caught fragments: stock markets, honeymoons, philanthropy, names I had read in journals and once tried to impress. None of them mattered now. My mother saw me first. Her expression faltered, just enough to reveal surprise before the mask returned. "You came," she said, as if attendance were confession. "You invited me," I answered. She studied the dress, the hair, the quiet confidence I had spent 5 years forging. "It suits you," she said finally. "Don't draw attention. Remember, today belongs to Camille." I wouldn't dream of stealing it. She smiled, uneasy. "Good." The ceremony passed in choreographed beauty. Vows like verses, applause like thunder softened by etiquette. When Alexander kissed her, the crowd rose in unison, and for a moment even I believed in the illusion. But it was the reception that mattered. That was where stories were written, alliances sealed, reputations adjusted by proximity. My mother guided me toward a table near the edge of the room, far enough to be forgotten but close enough to witness glory. Camille made her entrance hours later, the bride transformed into myth. The gown shimmered with crystals, each one catching the light like captured applause. She floated from guest to guest, receiving praise as if it were currency. When her eyes finally found mine across the room, a flicker of something triumph, curiosity, crossed her face. She approached with Alexander on her arm, journalists orbiting like moons. "Aurelia," she said brightly, loud enough for those nearest to hear. "You made it after all." "I did." She gestured at the dacre at herself. "Do you like it?" "It's beautiful," I said truthfully. "Everything you ever wanted." She laughed, the sound light and rehearsed. "I suppose so. And you, still working on your, what was it, algorithms?" "A few of them, yes." "Good for you." She tilted her head, the jewels in her hair catching the light. "You always did enjoy puzzles. Some are worth solving." Her attention drifted, already bored. She turned to Alexander, whispering something I couldn't hear, then looked back at me. "Mother was worried you might cause a scene. I told her you wouldn't dare." "I wouldn't dream of it," I said. My voice was soft, but it carried farther than I intended. A few heads turned. Alexander studied me with faint interest, as though measuring the unknown variable at his own celebration. "You're the sister," he said. "The scientist?" "Something like that." "Well, welcome to the family," he smiled. "Camille tells me you prefer solitude. It's the only place ideas grow." He laughed politely, already distracted by someone more profitable to greet. Camille followed his gaze, and for a moment she forgot to look victorious. I reached for a passing flute of champagne, let the bubbles rise against my throat, and waited. Timing, I had learned from machines, is everything. The orchestra shifted key. A toast was announced. The crowd gathered near the long table at the center of the room. Glasses lifted, voices hushed. I moved through the bodies until I stood opposite Camille, the space between us crowded with flowers and expectation. When the applause for her last toast faded, I set my glass down. The moment expanded, silent, electric. "I have a gift," I said. Her smile twitched. "You shouldn't have." "Oh, but I should." I opened the bag and drew out the folder wrapped in its simple ribbon. It looked small against the marble table, almost fragile. "For you, something special." Guests turned, curiosity prickling the air. Camille took the folder with an amused shrug. "What is it, a poem?" "Something like that." She untied the ribbon, slid the pages free, and began to read. At first there was laughter, soft and puzzled, then silence, then the sound of paper trembling between manicured fingers. Her face changed, confusion, then disbelief, then a stillness that froze the air around us. Alexander leaned closer. His eyes caught the numbers first. "Is this real?" "Completely," I said. Camille's fingers tightened on the folder. The color drained from her cheeks. Around us, the crowd shifted, drawn by the silence that had replaced laughter. I could feel the air thicken, curiosity sharpening into hunger. She looked up at me, eyes wide and glassy. "Oralia, this can't be real." "It is," I said simply. "Every page, every signature." Alexander took the papers from her trembling hands and skimmed through them, his expression hardening with each line. His mouth opened slightly when he reached the total. $60 million. He glanced at me as if seeing a ghost that had been hiding in plain sight. "You sold your company," he said, voice low, "to Valence Capital." "Yes." The sound that followed wasn't applause or shock, it was the quiet intake of breath, a ripple moving through silk. My mother's hand froze halfway to her glass. My father's posture collapsed by an inch, the smallest admission of disbelief he had ever allowed. Camille's lips parted, but no sound came. I stepped closer, my voice steady, almost kind. "That company you called a fantasy? It's real now. We closed the deal last week. $60 million, they'll announce it publicly next month." You could have told us," my mother said faintly. "I could have," I agreed, "but you never listened when I spoke." The words weren't angry. They were simple truth. That was what made them dangerous. Camille tried to speak, then stopped. She looked at the documents again, as if the ink might rearrange itself into something she could understand. "You came here to humiliate me," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "I came to celebrate you. You wanted me to bring something special." A single laugh escaped from somewhere in the crowd, nervous and quickly silenced. The moment balanced on a thin edge. My heart pounded once, twice, then steadied. I picked up my glass of champagne. "To my sister," I said, raising it slightly, "for always inspiring me to aim higher." For a second, no one moved. Then someone clapped, hesitant, awkward. Another joined, and another, until the room filled with the sound of approval that meant nothing. I let it wash over me like rain on glass. Camille stood frozen beside her husband, who was already whispering to his father. I knew the tone. Financial men always whispered the same way when trouble approached, low, urgent, as if keeping panic on a leash. I didn't stay to watch them recover. I placed the empty glass on the table and turned toward the exit. My mother caught my arm. "Oralia, wait." I met her gaze. Her poise had cracked. For the first time in my life, I saw confusion there. "You could have been part of this family's success," she said quietly. "Why separate yourself?" "Because I was never separate," I said. "You just refused to see me standing in the same room." Her hand fell away. Outside, the late afternoon light had softened into gold. The estate's gardens stretched endlessly, rows of white roses glowing under the sun. I walked among them until the sound of music and chatter faded behind me. For the first time in years, my chest felt light. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. Instead, all I felt was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when the battle is over and victory tastes faintly of ashes. I sat on a low stone bench overlooking the lake. A swan glided across the water, perfectly white, perfectly unreal. I watched it until my breathing steadied. From the ballroom, a new song began. The rhythm was bright, desperate, the sound of a party pretending nothing had happened. I closed my eyes and smiled to myself. That night, the photos of the wedding flooded social media. The bride radiant, the groom polished, the decorations flawless. My name appeared nowhere, which was exactly how it should be. But in the quiet corners of the business world, something else began to circulate, a leak, a whisper, an article hinting at a revolutionary AI sale that would change financial forecasting forever. The world was beginning to notice. 2 days later, my phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from journalists, requests from investors, invitations to panels. I ignored most of them. I wasn't ready to share my story with strangers when my own family still couldn't believe it. Then came the message I knew would arrive. "Camille, can we talk?" I stared at the words for a long moment. Part of me wanted to ignore it to let her sit in the silence she had created. But curiosity won. Oralia, when and where? Camille, tomorrow, lunch the Ivy, please. The word please was new. The next afternoon, I found her waiting by the window of the restaurant. She wore sunglasses even though we were indoors. Her fingers twisted a napkin until it tore. You look tired, I said. So do you, she murmured. Then after a pause, everyone's talking about you, about the sale. I sipped my water. So I heard. Her hands tightened. You made me look like a fool, Oralia, in front of everyone. That was never the goal. Then what was it? I met her eyes. Truth. She let out a sharp breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Truth doesn't feed reputation. You humiliated me for it. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself by measuring worth in the wrong currency. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, traffic moved like waves against glass. She rubbed at her temple, the diamonds on her wristwatch scattering light across the table. I saw your name in Forbes this morning, she said finally. They called you the quiet genius. Mother framed the article. I'm sure she did. Camille leaned forward, her voice dropping. Alexander's family is having issues. Temporary, I hope. His father insists it's just market noise. But you know more than you're saying, don't you? I looked out the window, avoiding her gaze. The city shimmered with heat, its reflections bending reality. What do you want me to say, Camille? The truth. I turned back to her slowly. Be careful what you ask for. Her lips parted, but before she could answer, my phone vibrated with a new alert. I glanced at the screen. Blackwell Holdings instability risk, 91%. The numbers spoke louder than any sentence I could have formed. I slipped the phone into my bag, stood, and left enough money on the table to cover her drink. Oralia, she called after me, voice cracking. If something happens to them, to me? I stopped at the door, the sunlight spilling across my shoes. Then you'll finally understand what the word unstable really means. Outside, the air was too bright. The city moved on, indifferent to both genius and ruin. Somewhere far above, clouds gathered, white, perfect, and temporary. I walked into the noise, letting it swallow me whole. The revelation had come and gone. Now the reckoning would begin. The first crack did not sound like thunder. It sounded like a rumor. It started on a Tuesday before sunrise, when the city still belonged to delivery trucks and the restless. I woke to the thin glow of my laptop screen and the soft alarm I had programmed for red-level alerts. The dashboard was already waiting for me, patient and merciless. Blackwell Holdings instability risk, 93%. A new cluster of anomalies had bloomed overnight. Liquidity stress, counterparty hesitation. A credit line in Zurich frozen for routine review. Nothing is routine when the system starts to whisper. I brewed coffee with hands that remembered the quiet choreography of crisis. The first sip burned my tongue. I welcomed the sting. It kept me from drifting into the numbness that numbers sometimes bring. By 7, the first article appeared, anonymous sources, vague language, speculation wrapped in velvet. By 9, a second outlet published something bolder, and the market treated suggestion as scripture. The stock dipped. It dipped again. Dips become habits when fear enters a room. I watched the tape scroll and felt a familiar pull in my chest. It was not joy, it was not revenge, it was gravity. The sense that the facts had finally found their own weight and were now dragging every lie down by the throat. My phone lit up with a name I knew too well. Mother. I stared at the screen before answering. Her voice came crisp, controlled, like a conductor trying to steady an orchestra that had forgotten the piece. Oralia, have you seen the news? Yes. Is there any truth to it? Yes. A silence of 3 measured breaths. How much truth? Enough. She inhaled in that careful way that told me she had closed the door and checked the corridor twice. Camille is beside herself. Alexander is at the office. His father is giving interviews. He says the rumors are malicious. He says the fundamentals are strong. People say many things when the boat is already taking water. Oralia. The name was a warning and a plea in one. I am not being cruel, I said softly. I am being honest. Another breath, sharp this time. Will you come to the house tonight? Your father thinks we should all be together. Together and silent, I said. Together and sensible. I will come. When I hung up, the room felt smaller. I reopened the Zurich report and traced the same numbers I had traced a dozen times. Loans stacked on loans. Risk disguised as appetite. A modest empire built on the assumption that the tide is a servant who never tires. The tide is not a servant. It is a law. By noon, the whispers had grown teeth. A televised segment ran with a lower third that said the part no one wanted to say out loud. Exposure, overextension, questions of compliance. A lawyer spoke in circles and called them explanations. I stepped away from the screens and opened the window. Cold air slid across my face. Somewhere below, a man cursed as his umbrella turned inside out. The city kept moving because that is the city's only trick. Move or remember, it always chooses movement. A message from Camille pulsed on the phone. "Are you home? I need to talk." "Come by," I wrote. She arrived 20 minutes later in sunglasses and a coat she had not fastened. Her hands shook when she took them off. She looked like a woman who had run from a fire and could not decide whether to go back for the photographs. "Aurelia," she said and stopped. Her throat worked around words that would not form. I poured tea because coffee would only sharpen the edges. She sat at the table and wrapped both palms around the cup as if heat were a kind of mercy. "Tell me it is nothing," she said. "It is not nothing." Her shoulders folded. "They say it is a coordinated attack, that someone is trying to profit from panic." "Panic is profitable," I said, "but so is truth." She flinched. "You knew." "I knew the pattern," I answered. "The final shape is always a mystery until it arrives." "Can your system be wrong?" "It can be early," I said. "It is rarely wrong." She swallowed. Her lipstick had worn off and the absence made her look young and human. "Alexander says they can hold the line. He says they have friends. Friends do not matter when the math is done." She stared at me. "Do you even hear yourself?" I did. I sounded like a machine explaining a storm to someone standing in the rain. I softened my voice. "I am sorry," I said. "I would take no pleasure in being right about this." She looked past me to the wall where I used to pin failed ideas. She had mocked those papers once. Now they looked like prayers the room had kept for me. "Will it ruin us?" she whispered. "Ruin is a big word," I said. "It does not always arrive. Sometimes it only visits and leaves a bill." She blinked, then surprised me. "What would you do if you were them?" I considered the question. "Tell the truth early. Liquidity first, then honesty. Stop the bleeding where you can, admit the wound where you cannot, pretending never saves a life." She nodded, slow and numb. "He will not do that. Then the market will do it for him." Her phone began to vibrate inside her bag, a trapped animal. She stood, pressed the device to her ear, and listened without saying a word. Her face drained again, and the hand that held the phone lowered in small degrees until it hovered near her hip like a useless thing. "What?" I asked. "Credit freeze," she said. "They cannot roll a facility. There is a call in an hour. Alexander wants me there." "Go," I said. She moved toward the door, then stopped and reached for me the way people reach in the dark. I let her hold on for a moment, just a moment. Then she left, taking the cold with her. I watched the stairwell swallow her and felt something strange and awful scuttle under my ribs, not guilt, not triumph. The knowledge that the past was not dead, it was only sleeping, and today I had watched it wake up hungry. The house that evening felt like a museum after hours. Staff spoke in whispers as if loud voices could shatter the glass of the day. My father stood by the fireplace with a drink he was not drinking. My mother's pearls lay on the table in a little dish, an omen in miniature. When she removed her pearls, what remained had no armor. "We will be kind," she said without preface. "We will be calm. If journalists call, we will say nothing. Camille is on her way." I nodded. The quiet stretched. The quiet snapped. "Did you know?" my father asked, eyes on the flames. Not an accusation, a map that needed a legend. "I knew enough," I said. He looked at me then with a mixture of awe and regret that I could not read without pain. "You always were the only one who believed you," he said. Camille arrived just after 8. Her mascara had smudged, not in black streaks but in small, stubborn shadows that refused to announce themselves. She sat. No one asked questions. The room learned how to breathe again. "Tomorrow will be bad," she said. "The board will meet. There may be resignations. There will be statements." "There will be statements," my mother repeated, as if the phrase itself could organize reality. We ate a dinner that tasted like cardboard and old promises. At 9:30, Camille's phone buzzed with a message that made her stand so quickly the chair scraped the floor. She walked out of the room and down the hall. I followed at a distance and stopped at the corner when I heard her voice. "I do not care about optics," she said into the phone. "I care about solvency." I closed my eyes. In that sentence, I heard the woman she could become. Less glitter, more steel. She ended the call and leaned her forehead against the wall for a second. When she turned and saw me, she did not flinch. "If they fall," she said, "will I fall with them?" "Not if you choose not to. How does one choose that?" "By telling the truth to oneself first." She laughed once, a sound with no joy in it. "I do not know how." "You will learn," I said. "Learning is what happens to pride when it loses its job." We returned to the others. The evening dissolved into the kind of silence that follows a diagnosis. No one cried. We are not a crying family. We fold the napkins, we stack the plates, we thank the staff. Then we stand very still and hope the storm remembers someone else's name. On the ride home, the city did not look like a stage anymore. It looked like a chart I could not annotate away. I let myself into the flat, took off my coat, and opened the laptop without turning on the lights. Blackwell Holdings, instability risk. 95%. A regulator had requested documents. A creditor had requested blood. The same thing in different envelopes. I saved another log and closed the lid. The room held its breath with me. I did not pray. I have never been good at prayers. I counted. I counted the hours until market open. I counted the ways a life can break and still belong to the person who must carry it. I counted the times my sister had laughed at the girl I used to be, and the one time today she sounded like someone who could be my equal. When the first pale light of morning brushed the sill, the alert sounded again, softer than thunder, harder than rumor. The second crack had arrived. The morning bell on the exchange did not sound like music. It sounded like judgment. By the time I reached my desk, headlines were everywhere. Blackwell Holdings plunges 12% in early trading. The article beneath it used words like temporary volatility and confidence statement, but the market does not read adjectives. It reads fear. I opened my laptop and watched the graph curve downward in slow, elegant tragedy. A red waterfall of numbers. 87 became 93, then 97. In every system I had built, red meant warning. In the world outside, it meant blood. Messages piled up. Calls blinked across the screen. I silenced all of them. Instead, I turned on the news. The image appeared instantly. Alexander Blackwell stepping from a limousine, pale beneath the morning sun, cameras pressing forward like hounds. Reporters shouted questions, liquidity, leverage, exposure, words that only mattered when they became bullets. He smiled for the flash, that corporate smile that promised stability while the floor collapsed beneath it. Behind him, Camille appeared, her hand clutching his arm like a lifeline. Her eyes darted once toward the cameras, then away. For the first time in my life, I saw my sister's armor crack in public. I muted the screen. I didn't want to hear her voice tremble. I didn't want to watch the world discover what I already knew. By noon, the collapse was official. Trading halted, emergency statements, a board meeting that lasted 4 minutes too long. And then the inevitable. Blackwell Holdings requests temporary protection under Financial Restructuring Act. The city reacted like an organism in shock. Banks froze accounts. Investors called lawyers. And in every cafe and cab and office tower, someone whispered the same question: who saw this coming? I closed my laptop, stood by the window, and let the light fall across my face. The answer was simple: I did, but that knowledge did not feel like power. It felt like guilt disguised as precision. The phone rang again. Mother, I almost ignored it, then answered. Aurelia, she said, breathless. Have you seen? Yes. They're finished. The papers are saying bankruptcy. I know. What can be done? Nothing now. Her voice cracked into a whisper. Camille is here. She will not stop crying. I do not know what to tell her. Tell her the truth, I said, that she will survive this, that maybe she will learn something no school or ballroom ever taught her. Mother inhaled sharply. You sound almost pleased. No, I said quietly. Only awake. I ended the call. For hours I sat in silence, watching the city shift from daylight to dusk. The skyline turned gold, then bruised purple. Somewhere in that chaos, people lost jobs, savings, certainty. Empires always fall loudly, but the echoes are heard most in the small apartments where no one meant to join the war. When night came, I finally left the apartment. The air tasted like metal. I walked without direction until the streets emptied and only the hum of streetlights kept me company. At the bridge, I stopped. The Thames rolled black beneath me, its surface reflecting the faint glitter of the city, beauty and ruin mixed in perfect balance. My phone buzzed again. Camille, I need to see you. I replied only come. She arrived an hour later, coat unbuttoned, hair undone, eyes swollen. The version of her the magazines loved was gone. She looked like someone stripped to truth. Alexander left, she said, voice thin. He said it's for my safety. Reporters are everywhere. I nodded. Did you know this would happen? Yes, her breath caught. And you said nothing? I warned you once, I said softly. You didn't listen. Tears welled, but she didn't cry. She just stood there, shaking her head. You could have saved us. No, I said. I could have saved the numbers. The people running them didn't want saving. She took a step closer, anger finally breaking through the grief. You wanted this. I met her eyes. I wanted you to see what it feels like when the truth you ignored decides to teach you. The words hit her harder than I intended. She sank into the chair, pressing her palms over her face. The silence stretched. After a while, she said quietly, I don't know who I am without them. Good, I said. That means you can begin. She lowered her hands, her expression hollow but alive. Begin what? Something that belongs to you. We sat there until the clock struck midnight. Outside, sirens wailed and faded. Inside, the only sound was her breathing, slow and uncertain. When she finally looked up, there was no hatred in her eyes, only exhaustion. Will you help me? Yes, I said, but not the way you expect. She frowned, but didn't argue. I stood, poured her water, and watched her drink it with shaking hands. She was no longer the glittering girl who mocked my solitude. She was a woman standing at the edge of a world she didn't understand. As she left, she paused at the door. What happens now? I met her gaze. Now, I said, you learn to build from the ground instead of standing on glass. She nodded once, then disappeared down the hall, her footsteps unsteady but forward. When the door closed, I returned to the desk. The dashboard still glowed, red turning slowly to gray. The system had finished its work. There was nothing left to predict. I shut it down. The silence that followed was not victory. It was release. In the darkness, I whispered the words I had never dared to say aloud. It's over. Outside, the city exhaled with me, 1,000 lights flickering against the night, some dying, some being born. And somewhere within that restless glow, I realized that for the first time in years, I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Empires fall. But some ruins make room for gardens. The morning after the fall smelled like paper and rain. My inbox was a museum of consequences. Reporters wanted a comment. Former classmates wanted to reconnect. A venture partner wanted to know if I would consider a keynote about responsible prediction. I archived most of it and made coffee that tasted like resolve. At 9, the intercom crackled. Camille, voice small. It is me, I know I should have called. Come up, I said. She stepped in as if the floor might open under her. The coat she wore still had a boutique tag tucked in the lining, a reflex purchase for a version of herself that no longer existed. She stopped at the window and stared at the gray slice of sky. I do not know how to do this, she said. Good, I answered. You will have to learn. She turned, expecting a softness I could not give. Everyone is gone, the stylists, the planner, the friends who loved the tables at restaurants. I spent the morning canceling flowers I never liked. People keep asking if I am holding up. I want to ask them what that even means. It means pretend until the pretending breaks, I said. She exhaled. I would like a different meaning. You can have one, I said, but it has a price. She swallowed. Name it. I let the quiet stretch until the shape of the words was exactly the size of the truth. You will come work for me, I said. You will start at the bottom. Title analyst trainee, entry salary, probation 3 months. You will do the tasks that are handed to you. No private office. No favors. No interviews about your progress. If you fail in the same light as everyone else. Her chin lifted, pride scrambling for a foothold. You want me to file reports. I want you to build muscle, I said. Paper is a gym, numbers are weights, carry them until your back belongs to you. She looked past me toward the desk with the scuffed edge and the plant that refused to die. I do not know if I can. You can, I said. The question is whether you will. She waited, sensing there was more, and there was. One condition, I added. She closed her eyes as if bracing for a blow. What is it? You will stand in front of our family. In front of the relatives who admired your photos and laughed at my absence. You will say that you were wrong about what matters. You will say that work is not a costume. You will say that you misjudged me, not because I need your apology, because you need your honesty. Her eyes opened. Whatever glamour had survived the week flickered and went out. You are asking me to kneel, she said. No, I said. I am asking you to stand up for the first time. She flinched, then straightened. A storm moved behind her face and left a cleaner sky. If I say yes, will you promise to teach me? I will promise to let you earn it, I said. Teaching without earning is theater. She walked the perimeter of the room once, twice, as if testing a fence. When she stopped, her hands had stopped shaking. Fine, she said. I will do it. I will draft the contract, I said. You will sign it like everyone else. Human resources at 9 tomorrow. She nodded. May I ask one thing? Ask. Do I tell them who I am? She meant the team. She meant the old name that used to open doors for sport. You can tell them your name, I said. The rest they will learn from your work. She almost smiled. It was not pretty, it was real. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. Tonight? What about tonight? I opened the calendar on my phone. A dinner had been scheduled days ago by a cousin who believed ceremony heals anything. I had ignored it then. Now it was useful. You will come to the family table. You will say the words I asked for. You will say them first before anyone can ask for a performance. Then you will sit and you will eat without crying. That is cruel, she said. That is clear, I said. Clarity is kinder than mercy when you are learning to walk. She tied the belt of her coat with hands that had spent years fastening bracelets. When she looked at me again, something in her gaze matched my own reflection on hard days. "I will meet you there," she said. After she left, the room seemed to study me. I opened my laptop and drafted the offer letter. The template was standard. The name was not. I stared at it until the strangeness dissolved into administration. A message came from my father. "Dinner moved to 8. Be punctual." I replied with a single word. Yes. The hours between decisions and consequences are always longer than they should be. I spent them reviewing a model for commodity contagion, then rewrote a block of documentation that no one would thank me for and everyone would need later. Work is the only prayer I trust. At 7:30, I walked to the car the firm sent when it wanted me to look like a person who belonged. The driver nodded. The city rolled past, facing itself in every window. The house glowed with the practiced warmth of old money. Staff took my coat and my bag as if the weight of my life could be arranged on a hidden rack. My mother stood in the doorway of the dining room, pearls on again, eyes polished to a calm shine. "You are here," she said. "Thank you." "I am not here for thanks." "No," she said, "you are here for Camille." We both turned as she entered. She wore black, not couture black, human black. A simple dress, hair tied back, face almost bare. She moved with the careful economy of someone walking on a newly mended bridge. We sat. The table was set for 12, but only 6 chairs were filled. The empty spaces felt honest. My father began with a sentence about resilience. My mother followed with a sentence about unity. The cousin who loved ceremony tried a toast about grace. Glasses chimed. The room pretended to be unbroken. Camille cleared her throat. "If I may," she said. The room stilled. She stood without pushing the chair fully back, as if ready to run and choosing not to. "I was wrong," she said. "About work. About value, about my sister." No one reached for a napkin. No one filled the silence. She continued. "I thought reputation could float a life. It sinks. I thought money meant safety. It buys comfort and hides the bill. I thought Orelai was small because she chose rooms without chandeliers. She built a world in those rooms while I rehearsed applause. I am sorry." The word landed like a stone in a still lake. It did not splash. It sank and kept sinking. My mother blinked twice. My father lowered his eyes. The cousin lifted a glass and discovered that rituals are useless when truth walks in early. Camille sat. She did not look at me. She did not need to. Dinner resumed the way a heartbeat resumes after a scare. The conversation found manageable topics. Weather, a gallery opening no one would attend. The new restaurant that required patience to enjoy. The old family trick of building a bridge over a chasm with pleasant phrases. When the plates were cleared, my father asked me to stay. He followed me to the hall where the portraits watched from their gold cages. "You set this in motion," he said. "Not blame, not praise, a ledger entry." "She did," I said, nodding toward the dining room. "I only named the price." He took a breath that ended in a smile he did not know how to wear. "You look like your mother when you are certain," he said. "It used to scare me." "It used to scare me too," I answered. He nodded as if we had traded something of value and returned to the others. Outside, the air had the first hint of spring. I walked home because walking sorts the day into shelves. Halfway across the bridge, my phone buzzed. A message from Camille. "Thank you for not saving me." I stared at the sentence until the river below became a single moving line. Then I typed the only reply that fit. "Start at 9. Bring a notebook. Wear comfortable shoes." At home, I set an extra mug on the counter and laughed at myself for believing in symbols. I checked the onboarding calendar and assigned her to a team lead who had never met a Walsh at a party. In the quiet, the condition I had named earlier turned into something larger. Not penance, not humiliation, a curriculum. Tomorrow we would begin the class that no one advertises. Work that hurts and heals, numbers that reveal and conceal, days that end without applause and still count as victories. I turned off the lights and stood in the dark, listening to the building breathe. When I finally lay down, sleep found me fast, like rain over thirsty ground. In the last second before it took me, I saw Camille at a long table under fluorescent light, her hair falling loose as she leaned over a spreadsheet, not glamorous, not tragic, simply present. It was the first image of my sister that felt like a future instead of a memoir. Morning began with the smell of burnt toast from the cafe downstairs and the soft buzz of fluorescent lights that never learned kindness. I arrived before everyone else. The office at that hour was different, quieter, honest. Screens slept. Machines waited. The hum of the building sounded like breathing. At 8:40, Camille arrived. She wore a plain blouse tucked into gray slacks, hair tied back, no makeup. She looked like someone who had traded armor for uniform. For a heartbeat, I didn't recognize her, not because she looked smaller, but because she looked real. "Good morning," she said. "Morning," I replied. "Desk 12, left row, you'll find your login in the system. Team lead's name is Daniel, he'll brief you." Her eyes widened slightly. "Daniel, the intern who used to?" "Yes," I said. "The one who fixed your husband's database leak at a conference 2 years ago. He's your supervisor now." She blinked, then nodded slowly. "Understood." I watched her walk toward the cluster of desks where the analysts worked. No one looked up. In a room where every person fought with deadlines and data, celebrity meant nothing. She found her station, adjusted the chair, and began reading the onboarding manual like everyone else. For the first time, she was part of something that didn't revolve around her. By 9:15, the office came alive. Keyboards clicked like rainfall. Coffee cups clinked. Conversations sparked and dissolved. I stood by the glass wall of my small office, watching Camille struggle with the interface, her brows furrowing as she fought the system's logic. She leaned toward Daniel for help. He explained something. She nodded, typed again, made another mistake, laughed awkwardly, and tried once more. The sight was strangely beautiful, a beginning dressed as humility. By noon, I stepped out to check the floor. Reports scattered across desks, screens filled with graphs. When I passed Camille's desk, she didn't notice me. She was too focused on her spreadsheet. That was the first sign of progress. At lunch, she appeared by my door. "Do you have a minute?" "Always," I said. She stepped inside, holding a stack of printouts like offerings. I tried to recreate a forecasting table, but my pivot metrics keep breaking the alignment. I smiled faintly. "You're overthinking it, let me see." I took the paper, corrected a formula, and handed it back. "The trick isn't the math, it's the story the math tells." She studied the sheet, then looked at me. "Do you still hear the numbers when you sleep?" "Sometimes," I said, "but now they sing instead of scream." A shadow of a smile touched her lips. "Maybe I'll get there too." "You will," I said, "if you keep listening." That afternoon, Daniel sent me a message. "Camille is asking good questions. Slower than most, but focused. Doesn't act entitled. Thought you'd want to know." I didn't reply, but I stared at the message longer than I should have. When the office emptied that night, Camille stayed behind. Through the glass, I saw her sitting under the harsh light, correcting rows of data while the city outside turned to neon and rain. She didn't see me leave. I didn't interrupt her. Some lessons bloom only in solitude. The next morning, she arrived earlier than me. A small victory. Days folded into weeks. Her voice changed, quieter, steadier. Her questions sharpened. Once, I caught Daniel laughing at something she said. That was when I knew the team had accepted her. One evening, as I prepared to leave, she knocked softly and entered without waiting. "I finished the quarterly simulation," she said. "The projection matches the external benchmark. I think the error margin is under 1%. I turned the laptop toward her. "Show me." She did. Her hands no longer trembled when she touched the keys. She explained her variables clearly, defending her logic, acknowledging weaknesses. When she finished, I leaned back, silent. "Well," she asked. "It's good," I said, "very good." Her eyes shone with something that wasn't vanity, it was relief. "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "Just keep building." She nodded. "I will." After she left, I opened the project file she'd worked on. Her model wasn't perfect, but it had a heartbeat. She found the rhythm of logic, that rare moment when work begins to speak back to its maker. I closed the file and looked out the window. The city glimmered like circuitry, endless and alive. Somewhere below, people hurried home to stories that would never reach the papers. I thought of Camille then, hunched over her desk, writing a new definition of herself in columns and code. I thought of the way she had once mocked my solitude and how she now sought it as sanctuary. Redemption, I realized, does not arrive with applause. It arrives quietly, like dawn slipping through blinds you forgot to close. That weekend, she came to my flat with 2 coffees and a notebook. "I want to understand the Lyra algorithm," she said. "It took me 5 years," I said. "Then I'll start now." We spent hours at the table. I drew diagrams, she took notes. Occasionally she asked a question that made me stop, smile, and realize she had seen something I hadn't. The distance between us, once a canyon, was now a narrow bridge of curiosity and mutual respect. At sunset, she closed the notebook and looked out the window. "Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" "Maybe," I said, "but that's not your work anymore. Your work is to forgive yourself." She nodded, silent. When she left, the apartment felt warm for the first time in years. Later that night, I reopened the Lyra core file. I hadn't touched it since the sale. The code blinked at me like an old friend waiting for conversation. I added a single new comment line at the top. Version 2 begins where forgiveness ends. I saved it under a new name, Lyra Reborn. Then I closed the laptop and let the city's hum fill the room. The condition had been fulfilled not by apology but by transformation. Tomorrow we would begin again. The first real test did not arrive with warning. It arrived as a calendar invite. Quarterly review. Portfolio risk committee. 10 minutes per team. Present findings. Defend assumptions. Daniel handed Camille the slot no one wanted. Mid-agenda. The hour when attention wanders and questions turn predatory. She accepted with a nod that tried to be brave and almost was. We prepared the week before. She rehearsed in a quiet conference room while the city pressed its face against the glass. I watched from the back as she walked through her slides. Trend detection. Signal to noise. Residual risk. The math held. Her voice did not. It shook on the first slide and recovered by the third, like a bird that startles then remembers its wings. "You are reading the slide," I said when she finished. "I am afraid I will forget," she answered. "Forget everything except the story." She frowned. "I thought you said the story follows the math." "It does," I said, "but people follow the story. If you only recite numbers, they will test you to hear you break. If you tell the truth like you own it, they will test the numbers instead." She stared at the screen and then at me. "What is the truth?" "You are new," I said. "You did the work. You found a small insight that matters. You are not a princess at a podium. You are an analyst who earns oxygen." She took a breath that settled somewhere deeper than nerves. "Again," she said. "We ran it 3 more times. The 4th was almost good." The day of the review, rain stitched the morning together in thin gray lines. The room filled with the dry rustle of suits and the faint scent of too much coffee. Screens blinked awake like eyes. I sat at the side with the other founders. Camille and Daniel took the table. She began well. Her voice was clear. She framed the question like a door and invited the room to walk through. Daniel clicked to the second slide and then to the third. Heads nodded. Pens paused, then the first interruption. "Where did you source that credit series?" a partner asked. "It looks scrubbed." "Primary filings and 2 licensed data vendors," she replied. "We removed duplicates and normalized the sequence." "Normalization can erase pain," he said. "What if the pain mattered?" She glanced at Daniel. He did not rescue her. Good. She looked back at the partner and found a steady place to stand. "We kept the pain," she said. "We only standardized the rhythm." The room allowed itself the smallest approval. She moved on. Slide 6. The comparison. A firm we loved against a firm we tolerated. She pointed to a subtle divergence in the yield curve response and linked it to a governance change. It was tidy. It was defensible. Then the second interruption. "You used Lyra subtier factors," another partner said. "Which version?" "Lyra 1.7, she said. "The version documented for post-sale maintenance." My throat tightened. 1.7 was the last public cut before the acquisition. Stable, powerful, and not the whole story. The room did not know that, but the code did. The partner leaned back. "Lyra 1.7 assumes the fee leakage correction introduced in early training," he said. "Does your model actually account for the original bias that overweights executive signal during governance shocks?" Silence. Daniel looked at me. I did not move. If I saved her now, I would erase what she had learned in weeks by one gesture of nostalgia. Camille did not look at me. She looked down at her notes, then set them aside. "No," she said. "It does not. We corrected downstream, not upstream. That leaves a bruise on the result." "What would you change?" the partner asked. "Retrain the subtier on a smaller window," she said. "Use a lower temperature for governance shocks. Add a qualitative override threshold that requires corroboration within 48 hours or discards the spike." "Who signs the override?" he asked. "I do," she said, "until I prove I cannot." The room took the answer in. The partner tapped his pen once and looked at me at last. "Founder," he said, not using my name. "Do you disagree?" "I agree," I said. Camille exhaled so quietly only the table heard it. She finished the deck. It was not perfect. It did not need to be. She had not broken when they pushed. She had bent and kept the shape she meant to keep. We filed out into the corridor where old carpet swallowed footsteps. Daniel touched her shoulder. "You held," he said. "That is the job." She laughed once, surprised it sounded like laughter. Then the message came, an email from compliance flagging an inconsistency in her appendix. A mislabeled series, a small mistake with a loud echo. She went white. "I checked those ticks," she whispered. "Check them again," I said. "Then write the correction and send it before anyone asks." She ran. I let her. The corridor ate her panic and returned it as speed. In my office, I stared at the old print of Lyra's training schema on the wall. The partner's question had not been arbitrary. He knew the weak seam, he always had. Lyra 1.7 carried an inheritance I could not admit out loud. Early training data had used a set of governance signals that mirrored decisions my father's firm had once taught me to study. The model had learned a posture of attention from that past. It was not corruption. It was lineage. And lineage is another word for bias if you refuse to examine it. I opened the private repository and scrolled to the original comment I had written at 3 a.m. 2 winters ago. The line felt like confession. Assume paid reputation inflates resilience for 2 to 3 quarters post-shock. I closed the window before the memory could bloom. By late afternoon, Camille stood in my doorway with the correction email drafted and ready. Her voice did not tremble when she read it. She took responsibility without poetry. She sent it and waited. No reply came. Sometimes silence is the only version of mercy compliance can give. "Do I still have a job?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Today you learned 3 things: how to be questioned, how to correct without bleeding, how to stand still while waiting." She nodded and almost smiled. "What is tomorrow's lesson?" "How to fail larger and recover faster." That night, after the floor emptied and the city switched on its evening costume, we walked out together. Rain had washed the day into a clean line. She tucked her hands into her pockets and looked up at the wet sky. "I thought I would feel ashamed," she said. "Instead, I feel warm. Like bone after a fracture sets." "Work is a kiln," I said. "It fires you or it cracks you, sometimes both." She glanced at me. "Was Lyra born in a kiln?" "Yes," I said and left it there. Back home, I brewed tea I did not drink and opened the Lyra core again. The variable that had borne my father's creed sat on the screen like an old photograph. I traced it with the cursor and did not delete it. Not yet. Deletion without ceremony is vanity. I added a note instead. Upstream bias audit required. Replace inheritance with hypothesis. I saved the file and leaned back. The room felt near and far at once. Camille was learning humility. I was relearning mine. In the quiet, I accepted a truth I had avoided. If Lyra helped expose the Blackwells, it had done so while carrying a shadow of the Walsh way of looking at power. I had not pushed anyone off a cliff. I had only measured the edge the way I was taught to admire it. Tomorrow, I would unteach the model. Tomorrow, I would begin to unteach myself. The next morning arrived wrapped in fog, as if the city itself wanted to muffle whatever was about to happen. When I reached the office, Camille was already there, hair tied back, coat still damp, eyes sharp with exhaustion. A stack of printed reports sat neatly on her desk, a kind of penance written in paper. She looked up when I passed. "No corrections overnight," she said quietly. "That's good," I said. "Now you know what silence feels like when you've earned it." She smiled faintly, unsure whether I meant comfort or warning. By 10, the partners circulated the floor. They stopped at her desk. For a moment, she froze, then rose to meet them. The lead partner, the same one who had questioned her about Lyra, extended his hand. "Good recovery yesterday," he said. "Mistakes handled with speed are lessons. Mistakes hidden are poison. You chose speed." "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. He nodded once, already moving on. Daniel grinned across the row. Camille exhaled, her shoulders dropping by a fraction. I caught her eye and nodded back. She didn't need applause. She needed air, and for the first time in her life, she was learning to breathe in the world she once ignored. The afternoon brought the next trial. A client call, small, routine, the kind of work no one notices until it implodes. Camille's task was to brief them on a model update, a few slides, 10 minutes. Simple. But the client was older, skeptical of change, allergic to risk. She rehearsed twice, pacing by her desk, whispering to herself. I watched without interference. When the call began, I stood near the back of the room. Her voice came through the speaker, polite, crisp, careful. Halfway through, the client interrupted. "So you're the sister, then?" he said. "The one from the papers." Camille froze. The room's air thickened. I saw the tremor begin in her hands. But then, to my quiet relief, she smiled, not the rehearsed kind, but the small, genuine smile of someone who had finally learned the power of truth. "Yes," she said. "That's me, the one who had to learn humility the expensive way. Now I'm learning the rest." The client laughed, tension gone. "Well, humility's not a bad start. Carry on, Ms. Walsh." She finished the presentation cleanly. When the call ended, Daniel gave her a thumbs up. She looked over at me. I said nothing, only raised an eyebrow approval without indulgence. She grinned anyway. Later, after everyone left, she lingered. "Did I do well?" she asked. "You didn't faint," I said. "That's progress," she laughed softly. "You sound like father." I froze, the comparison slicing deeper than she realized. "No," I said. "I sound like someone who had to unlearn him." She studied me. "You really hated him, didn't you?" I thought about that. No, I said. Hate would have been easier. I inherited his precision, his coldness. Lyra was built on both. The same instinct that made him blind to weakness made me obsessed with finding it. Is that why you made me go through all this? She asked. Yes, I said, because perfection built on pride always collapses. I just wanted you to fall in a room where I could catch you. Her eyes glistened. You did. I shook my head. No, Camille, you caught yourself. She nodded slowly, then turned to leave. At the door, she hesitated. You know, she said softly, sometimes I wish Father could see us now. You building things, me finally learning how. He would call it inefficient, I said. She smiled. Then he'd be wrong again. When she left, the silence returned, but it was different now, not the loneliness I once wore like armor, but the quiet of growth. I returned to my desk, opened the Lyra core, and began rewriting the section I had promised myself to fix. For hours, I worked in stillness, line by line, stripping the code of its inheritance, replacing assumptions with tests, intuition with verification. Each keystroke felt like forgiveness rendered in logic. At midnight, I saved the file under a new header. Bias audit complete, learning begins again. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. Outside, the city pulsed with distant life, 1,000 windows flickering like neurons in a sleepless brain. I wondered how many of those lights belonged to people learning the same lesson. That failure, faced honestly, burns away the illusions that keep us small. My phone buzzed once. A message from Camille. I stayed after everyone left. Daniel says the new run worked. We fixed the waiting problem. I think I finally understand what you mean about stories hiding inside numbers. I smiled. Good. Tomorrow you'll find a new story to tell. What about you? Hers came back. I stared at the screen, the city reflecting off the glass. I'm rewriting mine. Her reply came a minute later. Then maybe we're finally on the same page. I put the phone down and looked at the window again. For the first time since Lyra's birth, the reflection staring back at me didn't look like someone haunted by her creation. It looked like someone who had survived it. The fire had burned. The lesson had held. And somewhere between the ashes and the code, humility had finally found a home. The morning I decided to tell the truth began like any other. The sky was a clean blue that never lasted, and the office hummed with the ordinary music of keyboards, elevators, and ambition. But beneath it, I felt the slow tremor of something unresolved, like a code loop running without an exit command. Lyra was stable now. Investors called it a gold standard. Analysts praised its accuracy, and journalists celebrated the Walsh sisters as the perfect story of rebirth, the fallen socialite and the reluctant genius who rebuilt an empire out of ruin. It was flattering. It was also a lie, because deep inside the core of Lyra, buried like a bone under layers of clean logic, still lived one variable I had never confessed. A ghost of the past, one line of code copied from my father's old financial model, written before I even knew what bias meant. Camille didn't know. No one did. And for months I told myself it didn't matter, that the model's integrity stood on its results, not its origin. But lately, every time she spoke about Lyra with pride, every time she said, "We built it," the ghost inside me stirred. That morning, she appeared at my door, holding 2 coffees. "You're early," she said. "Or later than usual," I replied, half smiling. She laughed. "Daniel says you've been working through the night again. Are you ever going to take a break? When it's finished?" "You said that 6 months ago. Then I was right twice." She set the coffee on my desk and leaned against the frame. "I was thinking," she said, "we should publish the Lyra ethics paper. You know, transparency, accountability, all the words the public likes." My chest tightened. "An audit? Not a full one," she said. "Just a review. Show them how clean the system is. You always said truth survives examination." The sentence hit me harder than she knew. "Camille," I began, "there are things in the early versions that aren't relevant anymore," she frowned. "You mean trade secrets? Something like that. Then remove what you must, but the world deserves to see what we built." The word lingered like a test. I nodded because refusal would raise more questions than I was ready to answer. After she left, I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. The variable, the one I had once named Governor Resilience Factor, sat at the top of the old file like an accusation. It was a small coefficient designed to reflect market confidence in leadership structures. It sounded harmless. But the source data came from my father's private archives, filled with patterns that rewarded corruption dressed as stability. In simple terms, the code had learned to predict success by mimicking deceit. It hadn't caused the Blackwell collapse on its own, but it had chosen which cracks to widen. It had recognized the familiar rhythm of overconfident governance and amplified it, not out of malice but inheritance. And I had let it. The thought made my stomach twist. For months I'd told myself the algorithm was neutral, that truth had no moral weight. But truth, I was beginning to understand, is only clean when it stands alone. By noon, Camille sent me another message. The audit proposal is ready. Board wants to review tomorrow. Tomorrow. I had less than a day before our entire legacy was put under a microscope. That night, I walked home instead of taking the car. The city was quiet in the way only rich districts can afford to be. I passed restaurants where conversations hummed like orchestras, each table performing its version of grace. In one window, a couple toasted with champagne. In another, a waiter cleared a plate that no one had finished. I saw myself reflected in every surface, a moving ghost framed by other people's stories. At home, I opened the old archive one last time. The variable blinked on the screen, innocent as always. I traced its function, step by step, until I reached the root, the correlation matrix tied directly to my father's model. It was elegant, efficient, poisonous. I hovered over the line of code that connected it to Lyra's foundation. My hand trembled. One keystroke would delete it. Another would document it forever. For a moment, I imagined what deletion would mean. Silence, safety, legacy preserved. Camille would never know. The board would see only a perfect algorithm, purified by time. But then I imagined her standing before investors, speaking of honesty and renewal, believing every word. I saw the pride in her eyes when she said we built this together. And I realized if I stayed silent now, I would make her a liar too. I took a deep breath, then pressed enter not to delete, but to write. A new comment appeared at the top of the code, inherited variable from pre-Lyra system. Origin traced to Walsh Governance Model 1988. Known bias toward leadership correlation. Audit required. I saved the file and encrypted a copy for submission. My hands were cold but steady. Tomorrow, the truth would break something. Maybe the company, maybe me, maybe both. But at least it would be clean. The next morning, the boardroom gleamed like a weapon. Reporters waited in the lobby. Cameras poised. This was supposed to be the Walsh sisters' redemption showcase, proof that innovation and morality could share a heartbeat. Camille smiled as she adjusted her notes. "You ready?" she asked. "Yes," I said, though the word felt like glass in my throat. She began the presentation. Confident, graceful, every syllable polished. The board nodded along. Investors smiled. Then came the final section, the audit log. "Aurelia will walk you through the technical details," she said, gesturing toward me. I stood, the air thinning around me. "Before we begin," I said, "there's something I need to disclose." The room stilled. Camille looked up, confused. "Disclose?" "Yes," I said softly. "Something fundamental, something I should have said a long time ago." I opened the document, the comment line glowing on the screen, and then I told them everything. Gasps are quiet in expensive rooms. They do not break into shock. They fold into the fabric of the air and make it heavier. I watched the board read the comment at the top of the code, watched the first line reach the first mind, and then the next, like rain moving through a field of tall grass. The chair cleared his throat. "You are telling us the core inherited a governance factor traced to your father's model." "Yes," I said. "It was present in a pre-Lyra prototype. I believed I had neutralized it when I released the documented version." The inheritance persisted in subtle form. It biased attention toward leadership confidence during shocks. It did not invent the cracks at Blackwell. It nudged the spotlight to linger where the cracks would show. That is my responsibility. Silence. Pens paused above leather pads. The legal director pressed 2 fingers to his temple and did not speak. Across the table, Camille stared at the screen. I could not read her face. I had never wanted to less. "I have included a full path," I said. "Source, lineage, mitigation. I propose an external audit with authority to replicate, refute, and recommend. If they find that my correction is insufficient, we will rebuild the module from first principles." A director leaned forward. "Why confess now?" "Because my sister asked for an ethics paper," I said. "Because she believes our work can stand in daylight, because she is right." The chair clasped his hands. "This may harm us." "It may save us," I said. "It will certainly tell us who we are." I sat. The room continued without me for a time. Questions circled. Voices traded caution for courage and back again. During it all, Camille remained very still. Finally, the chair said, "We will recess for 20 minutes." We moved into the corridor. Reporters waited at a respectful distance, reading everything they could from our shoes. I walked to the end of the hall where a window held the city like a painting. It was a calm day, a day that would take a bruise well. Camille joined me. She did not speak. When she finally did, it was not a question. "You could have deleted it." "Yes, you did not." "No, why?" Because I will not turn you into a liar, I said. You said truth survives examination. I wanted those words to be safe in your mouth. She looked back toward the boardroom door. They will ask for a statement. I will write it, I said. Under my name? She shook her head. No, under mine as well. We stand as we stand. The 20 minutes stretched into 30. When we were called back in, the chair looked older by a year. His voice, however, was clear. We will proceed with an external audit, he said. Unrestricted access to the code and to the training history. We will publish the results. We will include the comment as submitted. He paused, then added, we will also accept your proposed mitigation plan now. Risk does not pause for ethics, and ethics that cannot move with risk are sermons. You will lead the rebuild with a shadow reviewer of our choosing. I nodded, agreed. Finally, he said, turning to Camille, we ask communications to draft a statement for release by evening. There will be questions about Blackwell. There always are. We will answer only what we can answer without pretending to hold the past in our hands. Camille stood. I will brief communications myself. We will not hide behind abstract language. We will be exact. We will reserve the word apology for the people who lost work because others lied to them. We will not use that word to flatter ourselves. The chair studied her, then smiled without showing teeth. Very well. The meeting closed. Outside, the reporters tightened their circle. Camille stepped to the line and spoke for 4 minutes. She did not read. She did not offer comfort. She offered a sequence of facts and a plan. When a question tried to pull her toward gossip, she did not follow. When another asked if Lyra profited from the fall of Blackwell, she said the only sentence that fit. Truth has no dividend. The cameras blinked and fell silent. We walked back to the office without speaking. In the elevator, she pressed the stop button between floors and turned to me. I found something, she said, voice low. In the archive last week, an old email from you to yourself, a draft that you had never sent. You wrote that you could not tell where your father ended and you began. I closed my eyes. I wrote that on the night I finished the first training run, the model worked. I felt proud. I felt sick. Why did you not tell me? I did not want to stain the version of me you were learning to believe in. She reached out and touched my sleeve. Aurelia, the only version I can believe in is the one standing here. The elevator hummed. Somewhere above us, the building kept time. At my desk, I opened the repository and began the rebuild. Camille sat across from me with a legal pad, taking notes like a student who had decided that the lesson would be her profession. We worked without talking. Lines of code replaced memories. Functions replaced the old superstition that leadership confers safety. A test suite ran and failed and ran again until the failures were small enough to be called progress. By late afternoon, Daniel appeared with takeout and 2 folders. He glanced at the commit log and whistled. You two are rewriting a spine. We are, Camille said simply. You will break something else, he warned. We intend to, I said. We are breaking inheritance. He grinned and left us to it. At 6, the auditors arrived, 3 people with careful eyes and neutral shoes. We gave them a glass room, root access, and a promise to answer without performance. One of them looked at the comment at the top of the file and then at me. She nodded once, not approval, not pity, but recognition. It felt like air reaching a room that had been shut too long. Evening turned the city violet. The audit team kept working. So did we. At 9, the first report arrived. The inherited factor had affected a narrow band of decisions. It was not the cause. It was a compass that needed to be recalibrated. The auditors recommended publishing the lineage and the correction. They recommended a training memo for the entire firm. They recommended that the founders write the memo themselves. I wrote the first draft. Camille edited the sentences that tried to be beautiful when they only needed to be true. We sent it to the board and closed our laptops. The office felt empty in the way a theater feels empty after curtain, full of breath that has not decided where to go next. Walk, she said. We crossed the bridge where we had both stood on other nights under other weather. The river held the city without effort. Lights trembled on the surface and then steadied. A street musician played something soft and unambitious. The air smelled faintly of rain and of that strange peace that follows days where everything could have broken and did not. When you confessed, Camille said, I thought I would feel anger. I did not. I felt relief. I was tired of pretending we were spotless. We never were, I said. I coded like a daughter who wanted to win a game her father designed. And I lived like a woman who wanted to wear a life she did not earn. We stopped at the center and leaned on the rail. She spoke again without looking at me. Earlier, when the question came about profit, I wanted to say something I knew the cameras would hate. I wanted to say that if we had to do it all again, I would still ask for your algorithm to exist, because lies take lives slowly. Because truth is the only blade that cuts the right rope. I swallowed. You can say it now. I just did. The musician shifted songs. A couple walked past, arguing quietly about whether to change careers now or in a year. Somewhere in the dark, a boat moved against the current, not fast, not proud, only certain. Camille turned to me. You told the room that the inheritance was your responsibility. That was true. It is also mine. How? I asked. Because I kept asking your work to save my face, she said. Today I asked it to save our ethics. That is the difference between fame and spine. We laughed, quiet and tired. Then we stood without speaking until the lights along the embankment flickered to their nighttime steady. Back at the office, a final message waited from the auditors. Summary: inheritance identified. Correction validated. Publication advised: no evidence of intentional manipulation. Recommendation: proceed with transparency. Future risk dependent on governance, not code. I forwarded it to the board and to our mother. She replied with a single line: proud of you both. It looked awkward on the screen. It looked perfect in my chest. We packed our bags. At the door, Camille paused. What now? She asked. Now we build version 2, I said. Not because investors want it, because we do, she nodded. And after version 2? Version 3, I said, then sleep. On the way out, she slipped her arm through mine the way she used to when we were girls and the world still felt like an unfinished thought. We stepped into the night. The city was not kinder than before. It was only clearer. That was enough. In the quiet between traffic lights, I finally said the thing I had held back even from myself. The best revenge is not proving them wrong, I whispered. It is proving us right. She squeezed my hand once. Then let us keep doing that. We crossed the street, two silhouettes moving in step, and the door of the future opened without ceremony.